Okay, I think we're good to go. First, welcome to this last panel for today, or for the conference, panel 6B. My name is Danielle HENGST, and I'm a media artist. I had yesterday talked a little bit about my work that can also be seen on the conference from next week on here in Latvia, in Riga. And now it should we want to talk together, or want to listen to some of your nice presentations, and it's entitled Light, Energies and Fields. So I was like just coming back to the very basic idea here to introduce this a little bit of what does it mean to grasp a thing, like in the whole question of PostSensorium. And I was thinking about the German term, because I speak German, about what does it mean to begreifen, like to grasp something, to grab it, right? So this is like something where maybe the whole journey starts from, that we are experiencing things that we cannot touch anymore, that we cannot grab anymore. And if you think about light, energies and fields, things that are not touchable or not even visible to us, it becomes even harder, I think. And this is really a challenging question. And I'm really interested about these projects that you are now presenting, and about your processes, about your insights, about your opinions. For me, it's always about this question, like how can we understand gases? How can we see about electronic magnetic waves and so on and so on? At the edge of this field, there's also questions about maybe like dark matter, or on the other hand, like the inability of our touch or eyesight to make understanding of an object or a complex a construction or a thing itself. So I'm very happy to have our first speaker on the panel, which is Richard LOWENBERG. And Richard LOWENBERG is a planner and designer. He's an artist and an eco-cultural activist. He is dedicating his creative life to the understandings and creative realization of works, setting examples for an ecology of the information environment, and resulting opportunities for development of a cultural economy. Richard is the founding director of the First Mile Institute and the director of the Telluride Institute, which is currently stewarding a networking for mountain sustainability initiative for the United Nations. Richard studied and taught at Pratt Institute, initiating its electronic media arts program in 1971. And he was one member of the founding team of the Kitchen in New York City in the same year. He taught techno-cultural studies at the UC Davis and was artist in bioregional residency there from the years 1997 to 2006. His interdisciplinary design, media arts, installation, performance, and art and science work have been presented internationally. So welcome with me, Richard LOWENBERG. The floor is yours.
Greetings. Everything, people can hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you wonderful.
And the screen sharing is working?
It's working. Echo? We are seeing info, echo, the nature of information.
Thank you. So let's see. I think my presentation is a little different than most. And in that I need to provide some context for this concept of information ecology. I'm in my 15 minutes here, I'll sort of verbally zoom from a contextual description down to a specific project that has to do with sensing of our environment, of systems in our environment. So for over 50 years, I'm an elder in our field now. For over 50 years, I don't know what triggered this, or I sort of do. When I was quite young, in my just barely over 20, I had the fortunate opportunity to interact with people like Marshall McLuhan and Buckminster Fuller, and some of the earlier generation of people shaping what many of us are involved in now. And let's see, I studied architecture originally and I'm a very good designer, planner. But I became quite interested over 50 years ago in our information environment rather than the built environment. And I also became quite interested in this, what was 50 years ago, a fairly new concept of ecology, a whole system science that integrated and tried to study the dynamics of complex systems in our world. And that included human life along with other living systems and what sometimes simplistically in physics might be referred to as matter, energy, and information, the constituents of all reality as we can understand it. I especially became interested in information, the ecology of our information environment. I thought many people, and I still think that people are, who talk about ecology are mostly talking about our biotic environment, land, plants, water, the air we breathe. Energy systems are just beginning to be included in our ecological thinking, and we barely apply the concept of ecology to our information environment other than metaphorically. But our information environment is an incredibly complex thing, and it may not be a thing in fact. It's not material. And in physics, it's explained with concepts around thermodynamics and entropy and negative entropy and so on. I won't go into all of that, but since 1970 or so, I've been thinking, all right, I know what I'm going to work on for the rest of my life, and that is projects that help explore, understand, and set example for an ecological understanding of our information environment. To do that, in the mid-70s, I established luckily it worked, I established a collaboration with NASA, the space agency, an arts and sciences initiative. Let's see, there we go. So many projects, but primarily I was interested in NASA's life sciences division and the ability to monitor our information, to use early information technology, first analog and then digital technologies to monitor our electromagnetic environment and our information environment and the various forms of radiation and frequency and the nature, in fact, of this living, non-tangible environment that we're playing in. All of us on this Zoom cast are playing in the information environment. And as you all know, very simplistically, we could probably say that at large, socially, around the planet, we are polluting our information environment. I don't think there's much doubt about that. The nature of that or how that happens is questionable, but we are manipulating, playing in, and polluting our information environment as we play in it because we don't really understand the nature of information. I think that's a huge, dauntingly huge subject. I'm constantly frustrated with my own inabilities to understand the nature of that world as I try to do projects that deal with that. So I played with NASA, and early on, the reason was to access multi-channel biotelemetry systems so as to monitor performers' physiology. Now, this kind of thing has been going on in their presentations on this Zoomcast by people working on the current versions of this kind of thing, monitoring movement, monitoring biosignals, EEG, heartbeat, EKG. I was especially interested in working with dancers and working with EMG, muscle activity, electromyographic signals. And this image you're seeing shows a NASA multi-channel, 8-channel biobelt which I was using, so we could actually monitor 8 different biological or biophysical signals. And those were interfaced with early analog and then digital video and audio systems. And many people are playing in that arena and in the context of live performance. So there's a bit of that. Here's another image. Here is Kaja, a performer using an EMG signal. What was unique about these systems 50 years ago or 45 years ago was that they were the beginning of wireless telecommunication systems. These were I could work with performers who weren't encumbered with lots of wires. We would just place these sensors, electrodes, and transmitters on the body of a performer, and we could play with the nature of these signals and produce music. And there's actually, if you go to my richardlowenberg.com website, or if you do a web search, you'll find some videos, you'll find some other things. In 1976, I and some colleagues were contracted to develop sequences for the feature film, The Secret Life of Plants. So this is 45 years ago. Among all the kinds of signals we were sensing around our environments, we worked with plants, and I worked in collaboration primarily with John Lifton from London, who was specifically working with plants. I was working more with human physiology and environmental signals, but we collaborated on the Secret Life of Plants film. You can find some short sequences of that online through a YouTube search, and converted very basic plant signals. We were actually placing needle electrodes at the base of the root and the stem, and using actually the first digital computer. This was a project where we transitioned from analog to digital. We were using an Altair system, which we purchased for this purpose. And anyway, this was the Secret Life of Plants. Lots of people are doing this kind of work today. Many people are using small Arduino and other electronics that they're home building, DIY electronics to monitor plant physiology and convert that to sound, music, image control, things like that. Here's another image from the Secret Life of Plants film of Jill holding a small biotelemetry system, transmitting her brain waves, which she is trying to control, to a receiver that then actually allows her, with her brain waves, to control video and audio, along with signals from 6 other plants, or 6 plants. So, and other performers. We had multi-channel biotelemetry sensing devices that really monitored the living systems, human and plant, in this environment, producing what was essentially a little bio jam session. So this was 45 years ago. This project, Secret Life of Plants, has actually in recent years been getting more attention than I would have expected, and some of the video and the still images and the diagrams and the documentation of this work has been shown, especially in Portugal, in Germany during the COVID lockdowns. But there's because of the current interest in this kind of work, there's interest in this early project. Concurrent with that, I'm also working on trying to really move forward on information ecology projects, which have dealt with sensing in its early years, such as this, but also with issues of surveillance, privacy, and in most recent years with information economics. How do we think about and address new economic forms for our society that really understand the value of information and other intangibles and externalities, as they're referred to. How do we value teaching and lifelong learning? How do we value healthcare? How do we value raising children and families? These are the issues and the actions that give quality to our lives and yet are outside of our monetary economic systems. And so I've really been using this concept of information as a basis for trying to understand the value of information, and in that process, the ecology of information. As we process information, we also create useful resource, and at the other end of the spectrum, waste. Ignorance, confusion, deception, those issues are waste in the information ecosystem and in an information economy. And knowledge and creativity and inspiration and learning are among the areas of valuable resource in an information economy. And I think this is an area our society is hardly delved into because it disrupts our current path, where information has been relegated to being property, a thing, rather than a verb, information as relational rather than a thing. So because of the current interest in this work, I decided, okay, if I were to do a plant and bio and human sensing project today, still quite relevant and a beautiful kind of thing to do, especially in live performance, to really show the complex relationships of signals in our world. How would I do that today? And my thinking has been that I would not do that with electronics, and I would not do it digitally. Too many people think digital is the end of the road here, but I would do it photonically. I would use light. And I think we're at the very early stages of the photonic era, which in terms of processing light and light signals and photonic signals, moves us into a new era of processing that is beyond digital and is a new analog, very complementary with the issues being faced with processing in quantum physics these days. Now, I'm especially inspired by photonics and the concept of laser interferometry, interference patterns. Many of you are familiar with this from work with holography and other uses of lasers, that if you focus two beams or split a beam and then refocus it on itself, it creates fringe patterns or speckle patterns that are rich with information. We hardly understand this. And so I thought, and especially in the last few years, projects like LIGO have used laser interferometry to sense gravitational waves in the furthest reaches of space, and to detect black holes and other phenomena in deep space. That same technique used for holography and for gravitational wave detection is probably the most sensitive means of sensing, of detection that we have. And I've thought, why not apply that on our more localized environment and do a project monitoring plants and other informational phenomena among living systems simultaneously to see relationships. So to monitor, say, plants and brainwaves and financial turbulence in our world and Schumann resonance and certain other phenomena in one installation, and see the relationships of these bio and eco signals. And that's the nature of a project I'm working on now called Info-Eco Interferences and Resonances. It's using laser interference patterns to see what Gregory Bateson called the difference that makes a difference. To actually, and fairly easy to to do, and yet actually quite difficult to develop the combination analog digital processing to extract a little bit of information from a lot of noise. As is true everywhere, our world is filled with noise, and our ecological agenda in the information environment is to extract valuable signal from polluting noise. This is as natural as any other biological or other aspect of our planet. I think we too often separate human actions and technology from nature. Light is nature. Light is natural. This kind of project actually takes us down the road toward things that are being worked on now by scientists, especially photosynthesis, which is really how plants create the energy and the chemical cycles that give them life, and photosynthesis to processing of solar energy into useful energy to operate our lives is really our agenda beyond our current energy systems. Photosynthesis is the direction, and this is a project that moves in that direction a little bit and tries to deal with the ecology of our environment and sensing that, but using photons, using light and the processing of light as opposed to electronic processing. Let me go back, and so that's pretty much my presentation, and if I have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Yes, thank you very much. That was very amazing. Thank you so much. So do we have any questions? Maybe I can start with a question before the others maybe organize.
Please.
Yeah. So I was thinking, you were coming up with this, or you were talking about this idea of noise in opposition to, let's say, confusion, right? Or not in opposition, but this is the confusion. The noise is the confusion. And then it's about like taking out a signal that is maybe in a way sense making to us, to the world, right? So we want to make sense out of these things that are around us. And we want to grasp what's going on there. And I was thinking, like, where can we, what picture do we draw from nature there? Is it then, do we also have to show the noise maybe to make clear that nature is noise in itself? Or how can we concentrate, or how should we balance these two things?
Well, I don't know if you've ever played with holography or holograms or even lasers, but if you just focus a laser beam at a surface and diffuse that point of light to spread it out over a surface with a beam splitter and a diffuser, what you see is this incredible speckle pattern. Let's see, such as this.
We can't see your screen anymore.
Pardon me?
We can't see your screen anymore. You stopped the sharing.
Oh, we cannot see. Anyway, you'll see a speckle pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And that speckle pattern is just rich with information, and yet there's the current difficulty. How do you look at all these little points of light and extract useful information from those? Most of those are noise. Now, noise has value. And and that's part of the work I'm doing, is actually how do you process signal, not electronic signal, but photonic signal? How do you process photon? And this is actually one of the central challenges of quantum computing, in fact, which is using light and photonics more than electronics, and using new forms of analog, not our grandfather's analog, but new analog as well as digital. The world is not on, off, either or, if then, or in other ways, Boolean. That's a way for humans to approximate what they can, in fact, grasp. Photonics opens a window to a much more interesting world of complexity. And the processing of that is, I think, I mean, I wish I was 25 years old, so I had a long time to work on this, but this is a fascinating world. And most living systems interact with aspects of our electromagnetic light environment. As we do, light is basis for our circadian rhythms and other things. So I think very few artists have yet played, some have, but very few have, and very few scientists or the public generally are really thinking about our world photonically as opposed to electronically, and in ways beyond on, off, 1, 0 digital. The world is continuous, it's complex, it's dynamic. And how do we develop as artists and as scientists the sensing systems and then the ability to process that information to extract meaning and even, if we're creative, inspiration? How we, tune into those fields and signals that actually tell us, give us some insight into the workings of ourselves and our relationship to our surround. Key to this project that I'm doing is not just monitoring one signal, not just monitoring a plant, or not just monitoring brain rhythms, but monitoring maybe 6 to 8 different signals in our world, and to see the relationships. Light and information is relational. Just, it can be relational between a 1 and a 0, or it could be relational in a vast area of dynamic complexity. To me, that's, it's a wondrous and lifelong creative challenge.
Yeah,
and right now, I do a small project that maybe inspires people to dig deeper into that approach to sensing our world and ourselves.
Yeah, super nice. Yeah, this was really inspiring. So do we have one more question? Yeah, please, Paris, go.
Sorry. Thank you, Richard, for this presentation, which is really extraordinary, and I really enjoyed the feeling behind your work. And I was wondering, maybe you can answer, what would be the appropriate space and geometry to represent these photonics? Because when you speak about this speckled pattern, I guess that would be like a projection into a flat surface. But what is in fact going on if we not only look at that surface in which that pattern is projected? What is going on in terms of space, really? Which are the dimensions? Sorry, I'm not into physics, as you can see, but
just a brief answer is that from my own work in this area, setting up the laser systems and the appropriate optical devices to manage that signal and project it onto a surface so we can see it. What we're seeing and what we're left with at that point is just essentially fringe patterns or speckle patterns, some sort of visual display of that complexity of information. There is no meaning to be extracted. I think the first stages I'm working on with this signal is sonification. And many people do that. We're doing that with plant music. We're doing that with many things, with brainwaves. We sonify those because we can more easily extract understandable information through sound than through image, which is so much more complex. So it's work to be done in phases. But initially, you have a projected image, almost like, I don't know if you're familiar with cymatics, which are just optical frequency resonance phenomena where sand or flour or some salt or something is placed on a surface above a sound speaker, and you can see the material move and create patterns on the surface based on the sound. This is a more complex version of that. You know, this is a very small project. Again, if you go to my website or just do a web search of my name, you'll find lots, everything from working with marine mammals long ago, and Coco the gorilla. I worked with gorilla communication for many, many years. Many projects with NASA using sensing systems. I was the first artist to take performers through gravitational simulation training with the astronauts back in the mid-1970s and things like that. So I'm really at large exploring and actually trying to, right now, over the next few years, set up some installations and exhibits of this large information ecology work, where we can see many different relationships that use art science collaboration to really understand what we mean, because I think we misuse the word nature and we misuse the word information. These are, or even art, you know, art, 3 letters, A-R-T, means so many things, different things to so many different people. And that's true. So our language gets, is one of our greatest limitations. How we speak about this, how we write about this, and how we creatively present the work is the great challenge.
Yeah, this is true. So I have to jump in here also in this task to be a moderator and to look a bit about the time. It's amazing to follow your thoughts and your processes and to take us with you on this journey. And I think we could talk for 1 more hour or 2 more hours. It's really amazing. So thank you very much for this talk and for these answers. Thank you very much for being with us and talk to us. Thank you very much. And we are continuing, and I'm trying to also follow. Could you
please put your website on the chat?
Yes, please. This would be nice. I had a look 2 days ago at the website. It's really amazing. It's really like an archive of almost like the history of sensing technology, sensing in art, and so on. It's amazing. I will continue.
Yeah, I have some other sites as well. I'll just post them in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much. Amazing.
Thank you.
So I will go on now with our next speakers, and we are happy also to have here with us. It's at least it's a team of 3 speakers with us here today. So I will introduce them very shortly, and I will try to make it also a bit faster so that we have more time for the talk itself. The first person that we are having here with us is Kay Dart, and she's a sculptor with an interdisciplinary practice that combines craft, design, engineering, and philosophy. The work she makes reflects how consumer behavior in Western cultures is forcing an imbalance between the natural, artificial, and virtual environments we interact with. Her aesthetics synthesizes biomorphic forms, consumer language, and parametric design elements. No material or process is restricted in Kay's practice, but she is always engaged with metal casting. Currently, she uses her practice to foster socially minded innovators and collaboratively fabricate objects that generate dialogue about current issues. Then we have on the same team, Taylor Hokanson, and he's an associate professor of arts at the Columbia College of Chicago. And his creative practice problematizes the social and technological systems we take for granted. We create art by creating artworks that employ functionality and absurdity to explore an uncertain future. He has exhibited, for example, at Ars Electronica, SIGGRAPH, ISEA, and TechFest Mumbai. And then we have Stephen Lee with us, who is a designer and an educator with the experience in brand, motion, and interactive design. He worked for a lot of companies like AT&T, Gatorade, Google, IBM, and he has taught on a number of institutions, both within the United States and abroad. He is currently an assistant professor of graphics design in Portland State University, and his research focuses on incorporating XR, extended reality, and other creative technology into a contemporary design practice. So this was the longest introduction that we have here in this talk, but now I'm very happy to have you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you well.
Okay, great. So yeah, thanks so much, everyone. It's nice to meet everyone. I'm Taylor, and I'm going to talk a little bit on behalf of our collaborative, although Stephen and Kay, please jump in whenever. If you view our talk in tile view, you'll be able to see that Kay's screen is currently showing our flaming sculpture, Fine With This, which is in West Virginia. And I'll or Kay, perhaps you could put the link in the chat. If you have a Twitch account, which is free, and then you log in through our website, you can have your Twitch name authorized to control the sculpture through Twitch chat. So thanks for having us. As you can hear from our super long bios, we come from 3 different places in the United States that are relatively far apart. One of the things that I've really enjoyed about internet culture, and then particularly through everyone just becoming sort of native Zoom denizens, right, is that all of our collaborations are starting to stretch really far apart, and we're starting to reevaluate how and when artworks take place. So I'll just show a couple slides and try to keep things short so we have times for questions here. So this is the finished product, Fine With This. And here's the URL where you can go to participate, finewiththis.site/participate. So please take a look if you're interested. And I'll just talk a little bit about how the project came together. So personally, I think a lot of my collaboration just has to do with wanting to spend extra time with friends who are exciting people who have an independent set of skill sets. So Kay and Stephen and I, we all have sort of overlapping interests in social justice and technology, humor, and so on. So when we got together, we were successfully awarded a grant that came out of Columbia College Chicago. And we just tried to think of a project that would encompass all the things we were interested in, humor being a particular one of them. So many folks will be familiar with Casey Green's This Is Fine meme. So of course, meme culture is rapidly becoming a really significant aesthetic that we all have to contend with. And I'm assuming we have a lot of academics here, and this has been a bit of a perhaps we're going kicking and screaming into an era where, meme visualizations are just as important as, say, the Western canon or whatever. But it seems to be the case, particularly amongst a younger generation of creatives. So we were kind of starting from this place where this comic is acknowledging how many horrible things are happening in the world and how a lot of us are kind of pulling the, covers over our head. But potentially it's also an opportunity to do something about it. So we came together and tried to think of a way that we could have an absurd and a functional work that also maybe encouraged people to engage socially. So we shifted the language, so moving from This Is Fine to Fine With This, just to be adjacent to the meme. And then we started working in Rhinoceros, the 3D modeler, and working with Truchet tiles. So we were using Grasshopper, this parametric modeler, Rhino, to try and really pep up the font. So we spent a lot of time thinking about what our letter forms would look like. And each one of those little hexagons is penetrated by a hole at the center because we knew we wanted our words to be plumbed with propane. So these would be cast iron objects with a big void on the center. And then you could get propane inside and light it on fire, kind of like a barbecue grill. So we went from Rhino and Grasshopper out to a CNC mill, right? So computerized fabrication equipment, and we cut all of our patterns out of foam. So here are all the letters ready to go. And then this was one of the big aspects of Kay's participation because she's an expert in casting and fabrication and so forth. So here's the process of moving these foam patterns through into sand molds, and the sand molds ultimately take the iron casts. And then here's the raw iron casts before they got the, we did CNC plasma steel backs so that we could enclose these spaces and put propane on the inside. So there's a couple of images that are not represented here in the interest of time. We also have, we had to put, propane tanks and the control equipment and all the piping and so forth underneath the steel cart. So these are installed on a cart that's about 3 by 3 feet by 2 feet high, or maybe 1.5 feet high. Everything is hidden down underneath, and then it, again, works kind of like a barbecue grill. So once the thing was entirely done, we were well in the middle of COVID and trying to figure out how we were going to distribute this piece when, for the most part, folks wouldn't be able to come see it in person. So it's physically located in West Virginia. And so for our first exhibition, we did this in conjunction with the NCCC IAP, if I'm getting the acronym right. It's a big iron casting conference in the United States. So Kay also organized a live iron casting event. And these are really great events if no one's ever been to one before, where you're welcoming the community and other artists to bring in patterns, and then everyone gets to help cast each other's work because you can't iron cast by yourself. And it's also just very, kind of explosive and interesting to watch. So this is a reaction mold. Molds that contain, say, wood, for example, have some moisture inside them. So when you fill them with iron, they have these very explosive, they shoot sparks, and it's really exciting to watch. So we had a live iron casting event that was being broadcast via Twitch. Twitch, of course, is normally used to broadcast people playing video games live. So we were interested in trying to sort of problematize and question what these different platforms are used for. So we're showing this on Twitch. It's really exciting to watch. So there's people there that are physically doing it and having that kind of enjoyment. There's people online that are watching. Here's just another example of sort of how exciting that is. And then we were also broadcasting this through Twitch via Open Broadcaster software. And if anyone hasn't tried this yet, it's great. It's free software that you can get, open source software that allows you to mix different media sources. So in addition to just showing the iron casting conference, which we were also broadcasting via Wi-Fi cameras that are attached to people's helmets, we could switch back and forth between those different views. But then we also had a whole series of animated indicators of the different parts of the iron casting process. So a little off the top is what we would show when we were skimming some of the dross, for example, off the top of a crucible that hadn't been cleaned yet. If anyone's interested, we can also talk about more of the embedded computing backend. So this piece is running on Raspberry Pis and Python. So right now there's a Raspberry Pi out there in West Virginia. And I have Python running here on my computer in Chicago. So whenever anybody makes a comment on the Twitch stream, my computer, first of all, figures out if that person has been greenlisted by our website. And if they have, it sends a message to the Twitch chat that says, go ahead and burst some flame. The Pi over in West Virginia sees that. So we're actually using the Twitch chat as a way for two software sets to communicate with each other across geographic space. So we're happy to talk about this at more length too, but this is our little controller we came up with. We call the boombox. And then finally, once again, here's the website, finewiththis.site/participate. So we'll have this running for at least a little bit longer. And if folks want to go check this out over on Twitch or here through Kay's Zoom window, you certainly can. Just note that there will be some funky delays because I think, Zoom is accumulating people from all over the world. Twitch is also running at a different delay, but the chat will tell you if your request was accepted. You may just have to wait a couple seconds to see it activate. Okay, so that's the talk. I'd like to make room for questions if anyone has them, but thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Taylor. This was I really like your humor in this. Also, like, it's amazing to see this, which is not happening so often, like in these kind of project, that you see that somebody is like taking this kind of idea from this humor side and then bringing it into the making, into the presentation, and so on and so on. I really like that. And also, like, in the sense of like coming from that meme culture and having this picture, right? So that you're staring at, and then actually bringing it to life with like real fire and having this kind of real sensation, or over the internet that you have it. And I'm wondering, maybe one of you has also a question, but I wonder, like, maybe I have one question for you. I wonder, how would you see like the entanglement between, let's say, humor or sarcasm, maybe also in that sense, and critical thinking. And how would you relate in your work with this?
Yeah, Dana, you hit it right on the head, because that's one of the things I forgot to mention. So when you sign up through our website and make a request to be able to control the device, right now we have a soft indication that suggests that somebody donates money to an interesting cause. So when we did the first exhibition through the Iron Casting Conference, we raised about $2,600 US dollars for kids from say trans or queer communities, or people that weren't able to afford registration fees, disenfranchised groups in general. We were trying to raise money so that people could come to the Iron Casting Conference, because that traditionally has been a very male, white, straight space. So we were interested in trying to explode that a little bit. And the funny thing about the work is that there's no shortage of screaming crises that just came up yesterday. You know what I mean? So if we apply for a show, and then it's a month until we actually give the talk, there's a whole list of things that may come up even the day before the talk, where we could direct people's attention and money. It's also not lost on us that, you know, climate change is one of the big parts of this, and we are just sitting here burning propane in order to make part of that point. So we are trying to wrestle a little bit with art making in general. I mean, I think one could argue that any sort of art making that doesn't involve standing in a soup kitchen or organizing for voter disenfranchisement or whatever, I think we really have to ask ourselves where the value is in all of the sort of high level thinking that we do as artists. So this was our attempt to sort of acknowledge the absurdity of art making generally, but also to make sure that all of the terrible things that are happening in the world don't just depress everyone into inaction. So we're trying to make sure that there's always opportunities to do good. You can still do good while having a good time and thinking about things that aren't just horrible, but it is an interesting line to walk. And I want to make room too for Kay and Stephen to jump in if you'd like to add anything.
Yeah, or Raphael can go on with the next question.
Sure.
Whatever you want. Yeah, this is good.
Yeah, this is a really fun project. I'm just kind of curious. I'm intrigued by the interactivity and Twitch, and I'm wondering if you all have thought about different interaction models or different ways of engaging participants. I mean, there's so many things, so many directions I feel like you could go in. So I'm just curious if you all have discussed that.
Certainly, and Raphael, I would definitely like to just sit and take notes on your recommendations for interactive models as well. But yeah, we really wrestled with it, because I think so there are models, for example, in the Twitch API where you can require that somebody make a donation via Tiltify or something like that before they can go ahead and control the piece. So one thing that we thought about was trying to not put up a lot of barriers for interactivity. So for example, when you download processing or the Arduino IDE or whatever, there's that kind of light reminder, hey, you might want to support this project with money, but then it just lets you say, I want to go ahead and get the thing for free or whatever it happens to be. So Twitch as a platform, you know, had an API with certain kinds of things that made sense to us technically. I think all of us have our fingers in a lot of pies. So I did a lot of the code development, but I'm by no means like an official coder. So part of the inspiration was just coming from what the APIs seem to want to do natively. But you make a great point that part of the potential critique here can come from really twisting and evolving what certain platforms can do away from what they're intended to do. So you think about OnlyFans, for example, right? There was a lot of stuff in the news about OnlyFans stopping allowing sex workers to make money through that platform. And then they went back and reversed that decision. Or Craigslist, for example, you know, there's a whole discussion about whether or not we do sex workers a disservice if we take these platforms away and make things more dangerous for them. So similarly here, we're trying to move, or I suppose we're trying to sort of gamify the idea of thinking about one's impact beyond just sort of internet armchair activism and doing something real, quote unquote. And in this case, the reality can be setting something on fire, and or the reality can be paying money into a cause that's going to make a difference. So that's where we've started, but we're really interested in the flexibility of the piece and moving on to different platforms and interactions, as you say. I'd love to either hear your thoughts on it now, or we could email about it later as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we should take it offline for sure. But one thought, even kind of as you're talking, divorce from the interaction model of participants is like, you know, you started by saying like there's been just like an ongoing stream of events that are coming that are just kind of like this, just terrible. And we're just kind of, you know, we're almost paralyzed by our inability to do anything about them at times. So I'm wondering if like there's a way of pulling in a data stream of like, what are some news headlines? And then, you know, thinking through alternative mechanisms of actually activating the installation too. So I mean, that could be another approach too, but we can chat more about it.
No, that's, I already am having a lot of ideas based on that comment. That's great. I'll contact you for sure.
And I would like to add, this is Kay, that, you know, within Twitch, we've also used Twitch features to have some more levels of interaction, like polling and things like that,
right.
Which was big when we did our National Iron Conference performance, was a way to interact with a larger group and really specific for an event. So, you know, the polling would cause something to change within the casting event. But also this piece can be activated in person, because we've had different events where people are like roasting s'mores over it, and it becomes this barbecue / campfire. And then it's a way of people interacting with other people online. Maybe they don't even know it. So, you know, for example, somebody could be roasting a hot dog while somebody also is trying to give off these big bursts of flames. And, you know, what is that interaction between the people, you know, in person trying to use this piece functionally versus somebody who's trying to, you know, either support a cause somewhere else or just have fun with, you know, the people who are using it live. So yeah, there's a lot of ways to activate it. And that's one of the exciting things about this piece, is it just keeps evolving.
We're trying to find the most American possible way of like trying to get somebody else to catch on fire while roasting a hot dog strikes me as very appropriate to my culture.
Okay, thank you very much. So I will, if anybody has a question, we can, I think, no, we are not. We are at the end of the time already. Sorry, it was amazing. Like, I think we could also like go here or further, and you will maybe also with Raphael. This is amazing. So good. Thank you so much for presenting for us and being with us here. Thank you very much. So this was very nice and empowering also.
Thanks, everyone.
Next up, we have here with us Danielle Damico. Hello, and I will introduce her a bit. She is a Baltimore-based multimedia artist and educator, and she received her Bachelor of Science in Film, Video, and Theater from the Stevenson University in 2014, and her Master's in Fine Arts from the University of Maryland in Baltimore County in 2021. Her immersive projection installation, What's to Expect When You're Expecting, was awarded the Johns Hopkins Saul Zaentz Innovation Grant in 2019. Danielle has presented work locally and internationally at for example, at the conference Taboo, Transgression, Transcendence, and through the artselectronica.art Global Gallery. So amazing. We are very happy to have you here, and I would say the floor is yours.
Thank you, Daniel. It's really great to be here with everyone today. It's morning here, but thank you for putting this on. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to hide the video panel. How does that look? I can't see anybody. So.
This is good. I think this is good. There's still one left, but I think this is okay. It's amazing. We can see everything. We can see everything.
Great. Yeah. Okay. So this is The Sky is Coming is the work I'm presenting today. It's a two-channel projection installation that displays an ecosexual encounter between a human and a developing thunderstorm. And so in the installation space, there's two rectangular channels that are projected adjacent to each other, pressed up against one another. There's astroturf laid on the ground in front of it that the audience is welcome to walk and sit on. And in the middle of the space, there's a pedestal with a perfume that I've created, it's a distillation of Bradford pear tree blossoms. And there's little sampling cards for people to sample the perfume. I am going to actually show a little bit. I have a video documentation that shows you the film that's in the installation is just under 5 minutes. So I'm going to show a little clip that features footage from excerpts from the beginning of the film and the end of the film.
Now we can't see it. There's
okay, sorry, hold on 1 second. Let me do new share. Okay, I think I have to go to QuickTime Player.
Thank you.
Yep. Can you see it now?
Yes, perfect. Thank
Great.
you.
There's a little bit of documentation of, let me go ahead and share my screen back to, the first premiere installation of that, which was back in April. And so a lot of the work that I've done over the past few years deals with abjection. And so in this, I was really interested in how that works between our bodies and the atmosphere, which is something that, you know, we're always breathing in, and when we're breathing out, we're contributing to it. And the weather being, you know, the state of the atmosphere. So us really being able to feel, you know, changes in pressure in our body and exploring that relationship with this work. And so Aidan Spann, who's the actor in that film, plays Ulfgar Philic. Vulgarophilia is a pretty common philia, actually. For some people, thunderstorms can result in a release of adrenaline and dopamine in the brain, which can cause sexual arousal. And perhaps one of the most famous vulgarophilics is the mythic Roman priestess Io. And this is a painting by Correggio. Sitting by the river one day, she is seduced by Jupiter, king of the gods, who comes to her as a dark storm cloud, a disguise to hide his extramarital affair from his wife, the goddess Juno. And so you see her here taken by surprise by this storm cloud. So it's been going on for a long time. And so a big part of this work and what I'm exploring is ecosexuality. So at a very basic level, an ecosexual is someone who engages in sexual or sensual relations with the earth. But it can be more broadly any intersection between sexuality and ecology in those studies. So the term ecosexual began to surface on online dating profiles in the early 2000s, and it was a way for environmental activists to identify themselves and seek like-minded partners. And since then, the term has been used in the marketing of sex toys and lubes that have been created with the consideration for the health of the human body and the environment, because these novelty products have long gone unregulated by the FDA. The term ecosexual is also applicable to activities of individuals selling nudes or creating pornography and donating the proceeds to ecological projects. And so the term has multiple connotations, and it has grown in popularity over the past decade while still remaining niche. And so Annie Sprinkle and Beth Stevens are, a huge influence for the ecosexual movement. They began a performance series back in 2008. They started wedding different elements of the earth. And so they've, wed a lake, mountains, dirt, coal, even the moon, and these elaborate participatory ceremonies. And as part of the vows listed on their website, sexecology.org, Stevens and Sprinkle share their story of a woman who told them, people often think of Earth as Mother Earth, but today the Earth is so battered, abused, exploited, polluted, blown up, and ripped apart that she can't handle being the burden of being a mother anymore. It would be better to think of Earth as our lover because we can take care of our lovers instead of expecting them to take care of us. And so a lot of their philosophies and their expansion of ecosexuality has been important to this work, which, like a lot of art ideas or ideas for projects started as this very tiny, absurd idea. And, just based on experience of experiencing a lot of afternoon showers in the summer in Baltimore. But it's crucial to understand how the activism of the ecosexual movement operates in comparison to mainstream environmentalism, which tends to take a dogmatic approach to anthropogenic concerns and has historically viewed nature as a pure and separate entity. And so the ecosexual movement utilizes an intersectional approach that breaks down the buttoned up, intimidating guise of mainstream environmentalism and allows for people to come together and celebrate, connect with the earth no matter what their viewpoints are, even if they're in opposition. So the ecosexual movement understands how these sorts of celebrations and engagements can lead to community building and inspire new ways of working with nature. And so with this work, I ask, how does the act of coming contribute to the process of becoming with the non-human? How do we explore the boundaries of the body in relation to its surroundings to contribute to a process that is already active and ongoing? So how do we become with, in this case, the atmosphere? And so my work concludes in a climax, a facial, which is sometimes called the money shot, and a dozen other things, is a euphemism for ejaculating on someone's face. And it's popularly attributed to the rise of the commercialization of pornographic films in the 1970s. But the act has been detailed in erotic literature dating back to the 1800s. The 18th century. So assuming the facial is specific to sex between humans, If anybody knows otherwise, please let me know. I'd argue that its integration into our intimate lives is the result of media influence rather than evolutionary impulse. And so for the purpose of this work, it intends to allude to an overlapping and intersecting nature and culture and demonstrate the influence our technological tools have on our intimate desires. So pornographers utilize the facial as a conclusion to scenes as an alternative to ejaculating inside of someone, which carries the risk of pregnancy and HIV/AIDS, especially in the 1980s and 90s. And because it also allows for the camera to capture both the ejaculate and the expression of the recipient in the same frame. And so from a post-porn perspective, I interpret and have constructed the facial in this particular film as a playful act in which both giver and receiver are enthusiastically consenting. And at the same time, I acknowledge, how it can be interpreted as, degradation and power play. And with a lot of my work, I like to say, and. So it is both. It is serving both in this instance, because what I'm looking at is this relationship between, our control of the climate, right, and how we impact the climate. So storms have the ability to overwhelm, devastate, and, at the very least, instill fear in us because they're beyond our control, right? Yet we know that human-related climate change has manifested in drastic shifts in weather patterns, including more extreme coastal storms due to rising sea levels. So in The Sky is Coming, the facial presents both of these positions that nature can dominate humans and humans can also dominate nature. And so the installation, I said, initially includes a perfume, which is available for visitors to spray onto a card or their skin and smell. And so I collected blossoms from the Bradford pear trees in my neighborhood and distilled them in an alcohol and water mixture for a few weeks. And so the scent of the early spring blossoms of the Bradford pear is popularly associated with the scent of human ejaculate. This is, of course, subjective, as most smells are, but it has gained some traction on the internet. So there's always like an article that comes out like every spring that's kind of like this. So the Bradford pear tree is a type of Callery pear, and Callery pear tree seeds were brought over to the US from China in the early 20th century, and a selection of those seedlings were cloned by scientists in Prince George's County, Maryland in the late 1950s. And so the resulting hybrid tree was the Bradford pear, which was envisioned as a decorative, durable tree that could survive various conditions and would grow uniformly along city streets and in suburban neighborhoods. So the Bradford pear trees were engineered to be mass-produced, abstinent, carbon copies, and were planted all across America starting in the 1960s. And today they're considered an invasive species. It turns out these sterile trees can cross-pollinate with non-sterile Callery pear trees. And so there's that, they're everywhere. And also the root structure, which once was smooth, has devolved into a thorny root structure as a result of the engineering. And so they choke out nearby native plants. So a lot of cities have buyback programs. They're really difficult to get rid of. But here I've, kind of harnessed their smell as a way to complement the climax of the film. And also to acknowledge, how this is an example of queer ecology, which is also central to this work. Queer ecology acknowledges that humans are included in and not separate from the natural world and its systems. So the Bradford pear tree is an example of how nature and its systems are ever changing as a result of social and historical influences, much related to our effect on changing weather patterns. And so the spunky odor of these trees complements the climax of the film. And it also is a metaphor for how we essentially engage our natural environments and project our own ideas about human sexuality onto non-human entities. And so you'll notice in the film, the characters reaching out and controlling the second channel, controlling the progression of the storm, much as you would with video on an iPhone. in the process of making this work, I was always kind of chasing thunderstorms much of, not this past summer, but the summer before. And whenever I was waiting for my camera person to meet me wherever the storm was coming that day we were going to film, I would take my iPhone and lay it on the ground and take footage of, the storm sort of progressing over the lens. And then immediately I would pick up my phone and sort of start scrolling through the footage. I like the idea of looking at it really quickly and being able to have that sort of control in this process of filming that, was really about us being at, what was going to happen. I had all these expectations based on technologically mediated expectations like weather forecasts and such. And so it was a way for me to sort of start to control the process, and it ended up coming into the work. So while this work is focused on the relationship between the thunderstorm and its lover, the hands in the film are also interacting with the storm as a digital entity. And so digital has, the definition of relating to finger or fingers. And in my film, fingers reach out of the frame, touch the other screen in order to fast forward through the captured video. And in the age where we record and view video on our palm-sized screens, this relationship between the viewer and the viewed becomes much more literally tactile. My hands engage with the grass in the beginning in a way that recognizes both their sensual capacity for feeling the environment and utility for navigating the digital interface. And so with this, there is this blur in this project between, the actual thunderstorm and the relationship between the human and the thunderstorm, but also, the digital blending in with the human being able to control, their immediate environment in a way. And so the contact between the film and the viewer becomes this literal, tangible, physical contact between two bodies. And by presenting the storm in this way, I've kind of given it a body, which is evidenced, when fluid is ejected and across the boundaries of that body in the end. And so one other thing I wanted to talk about before I wrap this up was the score for the film, which I was also thinking about, just the sensual, the way thunderstorms form, up in the clouds is convection and all these ice particles clashing around and ripping parts of each other off. It was just like this very abrasive kind of contact that's going on. And so when I was scoring the film, I was thinking about that and thinking about, the crossover between machine and pleasure and technology and pleasure. And I ended up using a Hitachi magic wand over electric guitar pickups to sort of create these, a lot of droney sounds. Sometimes it's really abrasive and squealing. So that's how the score was made, with this idea of thinking about, thunder being the audible part of the thunderstorm and lightning being, the more visible aspect of it. So I think that is what I have for today. Thank you so much for letting me share the work with you. And if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Danielle, for this very uncovering talk also about this work. I was looking at 2 days ago about this video, and I was like, so many layers in there that are not in the first moment visible to me, even though I just watched the video and the presentation. I think it's really something totally different if you join and you go into the room and if you experience the room themselves. So I would have a question, but I also see there are already questions. There was one question from Richard. Maybe you can ask yourself, Richard. Are you still with us?
Yes, I just have to unmute.
Ah, perfect. Thank you.
Fascinating presentation. Thank you. And because of the issue of Earth and sexuality and all of that, I thought I'd ask, given our eco-crises of various sorts these days, talk about the concept of earth rape, the concept of rape in regard to earth and sexuality and human beings.
Right. So that has been a lot of our relationship with the earth, you know, since we've been around, and especially since the Industrial Revolution. And so I think a big part of what ecosexuality is trying to push for is, you know, how do we, you know, not even approach it from like a savior perspective, but how do we start to see how we're a part of these systems? I feel like you were talking a little bit in your, you know, just the way that we use nature and with information systems, if we start to see the overlap and how, you know, we are a part of this and start to look, I mean, really like this is about eroticism too. So it's like, how do we establish these sensual relationships with, you know, our immediate surroundings, you know, with the sky, like with the grass, with the ground, relationships that are based on reciprocity. How do we start to see ourselves as a part of that system? Because I think that's the only way that's going to, you know, change how we see our part in all this. And I think, I mean, I hope that people are, you know, I think it's always about money and it's about power and like who's in power and who has the money making those changes. And I think maybe finally people are starting to see like how we actually do have an effect, how like erratic weather patterns are now, that they start to maybe be humbled in a way. But I think ecosexuality is really about changing that relationship and making it one that's based in reciprocity and not that power dynamic of earth rape. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because I think you also like when you were starting to talk about, let's say, the layers that are maybe behind this work, I was also thinking that you should. I can imagine you have been asked a lot of times about this this cum shot and about this moment where it turns for me, like in that sense that I think about who is like humanizing, or who is like where's the human, or like where's the nature in that moment. So there are a lot of questions coming up in that moment. And also what's coming up for me here is the question of power. Like it's a question of power relation. And you were describing this from the point from pornography and as a money shot and so on and so on. But also, I think there's also a power relation inscribed in a cum shot itself. So it's also asking for this question really precise in that moment that is then like carrying on. So it's not a moment of stopping or of doing something else or whatever. It's like just it's there and you can relate to it or not, like which I find like a an interesting decision to make. And I think it can be also an interesting experience to be in the room with this installment. Amazing, thank you very much. So I think thank you very much. We should go on with our next presenter, or it's also a team of presenters actually. But I'm really sorry because I only have here in the papers only one CV. So I hope that's okay. And maybe, I don't know if Olivia's here or not. So I have Raphael Arar and Olivia Arar being with here written on this paper for me. So, and I want to introduce here Raphael Arar because I have a CV. I found a CV, but from Olivia I have none. I don't know if this is on purpose or not. But I will talk shortly about Raphael. Raphael Arar works on complex systems, transdisciplinary design, and arts-based research. He currently leads the System at One project that is working on design, implement, and scale new forms of economics and governance that are equitable, ecological, and effective. He is also a board member at Leonardo, the International Society of the Arts, Science, and Technology. Previously, he worked at Khan Academy, tackled ethical platforms of AI at IBM Research, taught media theory at the USC School of Cinematic Arts, and designed over 100 iOS apps with Apple. His artworks have been shown at the museum, at museums, conferences, festivals, and galleries internationally, including, for example, ZKM, SLAC, National Accelerator Laboratory, and many others. So there's a long list in this field, but you can look it up also on our website from the festival. There is a really long list of occasions where the works have been shown. So I would say, I don't know how it's about Olivia, maybe you can say this shortly in the beginning, and then thank you very much, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. All right, let me get everything together. Let's see if I can share my screen effectively. Let's see. Can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can see it perfectly. Thank you.
Fantastic. All right, so I want to talk about a project that I worked on with my partner. It's the first collaboration with my partner, Olivia. Olivia is a health educator, currently pursuing graduate studies in epidemiology, but kind of a long time behind the scenes editor and gut check for me. So this is our first collaboration together. She's not able to present today, but that's a little bit about her background as well. So this project is called Food Carbon Footprint Index. And I want you all to kind of imagine this dystopian future where late capitalism really requires that individuals are solely responsible for the climate crisis. So imagine this future where government surveillance of individuals becomes really the norm, this popular standard for curbing carbon emissions, and any non-compliance would result in serious penalties. So the Food Carbon Footprint Index really imagines just that. It's a provocation based on a design fiction that requires participants to log their meals via a government-controlled web application meant to audit individual consumption. So the app calculates the meal's carbon footprint and then indexes the score against other participants. And so then scores are broadcasted for public scrutiny and collective shaming. So thank you for such a generous introduction. A little bit about me. I'm a systems artist. That's what I call myself, but I also work in design and R&D context. And the work that I do as a designer often informs my art practice as well. And the works take shape in various forms, but often involve systems-oriented approaches, which usually involve some sculptural components in addition to digital components. And this piece is actually quite unique in that it is purely web-based and digital. So without further ado, I'll just introduce a little bit more. So I think we all know that climate change poses one of the biggest existential threats to really the future of our species and the planet. And despite the scientific consensus on this, governments around the world have largely failed to coordinate any kind of global response to the growing crisis. In December of 2015, it looked like it was about to change when parties of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change reached this historic agreement to combat climate change and to accelerate and intensify the actions and investments needed to really stave off any kind of disaster. And so its aim was to strengthen this global response to fight climate change and adapt to its effects. You can see that meme culture in the States really spreads like wildfire, terrible pun intended, maybe. So I was not aware of Taylor, Kay, and Steven's project before this talk, before preparing for this talk, which is quite hilarious. So by 2017, concurrent with the election of former President Donald J. Trump, the US, which is the world's second largest global greenhouse emitter, announced its intention to withdraw from this agreement. And so Trump's decision really signaled this concerning trend of America first policies, US exceptionalism, and scientific denial. So amidst the storm of reckless decision-making, global confusion, and really deep concern for our future, my partner and I conceived of this project, the Food Carbon Footprint Index. We started ruminating on neoliberal ideas of governance, efficiency, and authoritarianism, And so we sought to imagine a future, a near future, maybe not so different from our current reality, wherein our government requires that individuals are solely responsible for the climate crisis. So in this world, the climate crisis is actually reduced to really the fine print that you might see on the refrigerator shelf in the supermarket, and citizens are thus paralyzed by consumer choice and really purposely prevented from realizing the scale of the political change that needs to happen, essentially displacing blame on the individual as opposed to the larger institutions. So in 2013, the Chinese government established this nationwide scheme for tracking the trustworthiness of everyday citizens, corporations, and government officials. This social credit system of sorts and government said that the project was going to be designed to combat corruption, business fraud, and boost public confidence in state activity. So the national program manages the rewards and punishments of individuals based on their personal, economic behavior, and was intended to standardize the assessment of social reputations. And so we can imagine that the program proved to be so successful in curbing disorder and encouraging social responsible behavior that soon thereafter, countries in the EU and the Americas started to adopt systems comparable to that which is currently in place in China. So starting in 2024, we can imagine that the US National Department of Defense began piloting programs to surveil and assign US citizens a social trustworthiness score based on their financial and social behavior. And so while this was intentionally successful in encouraging civic responsibility and really curbing public dissent, by 2030, concerns about the climate catastrophe had started to reach epic proportions. And so the state decided to intervene. So by piggybacking on the social credit system in China and in the States, the US government then implemented a food carbon footprint index, whereby the state began to track every citizen's carbon footprint. And so later the state would set emission caps on individual contributors based on this data. And so the state really kind of purported that citizen compliance with scientifically determined standard for carbon footprint or for carbon emissions could be captured, systematized, and then incentivized in order to lower overall emissions. And so what follows, what I'll follow with here is just a description of one of the surveillance opportunities that the state pursued. And so using an algorithm, the state started to capture various foods and determine kind of their overall carbon footprint, and then would map that onto the unique dietary and caloric needs of every US citizen. So each and every US citizen was then allotted this carbon score based on their needs. And so this carbon score that would be mapped from 0 to 100 would then determine how much of and which foods an individual was allowed to consume daily. And so anyone who exceeded this 100-point score allotment per day would then be fined. So here's a prototype of the Food Carbon Footprint Index, which is this participatory installation that's based on the speculative fiction that I just described. And it invites participants to take part in this social experiment that imagines this future not so far off from what could potentially happen. So individual food choices become the only standard for curbing greenhouse emissions. There's no onus on corporations or larger institutions. And so there are, of course, these familiar foundations in the Chinese social credit system. And so there's a commentary at place here where it motivates people not only to judge one another, but also maybe enjoy the power that the rating entails. And so building on this, this food carbon footprint index, invites participants to log their meals via a web application. It then systematizes citizen scores based on the calculations of carbon footprints. And so it's also a commentary here on capitalism in the sense that by those who are wealthy are able to bypass the system or are able to eat, countless hamburgers because they can afford to pay the fine. So there's a couple of themes at play here. And then what happens is, as participants are interacting, there's kind of a public leaderboard that you see on the right-hand side, wherein you can see everybody's score. And so the idea there is that by broadcasting participant scores, it's intended to really complicate feelings of civic responsibility, consumer choice, raise issues of class, power, quantitative aspects of governance and culture, and really the neoliberal state. And so we're hoping to kind of seek to complicate and critique this relationship with the power of individual choice in the face of what is really a global looming environmental disaster. And so the questions that we hope to ask here are really, in this type of future, who ultimately benefits and who loses? Are efforts like these actually encouraging self-development for the collective good, or are they doing something else entirely? And is there a better way forward? And so I encourage you all to access this site. It's optimized to be used on mobile web. And so I'll close in saying that imagining these sorts of dystopian futures can really challenge us as individuals to think differently about our current social and political climates, and in some cases even inspire positive change by way of thinking about this as almost like a dystopia can then free us up to, imagine what the negative space might be of that, and to also start to brainstorm and imagine alternatives. And so we're hoping to do just that with this project. Is this future we imagine really desirable? Does it even address the problem at hand? Is individual participation the most effective way to curtail some of the issues in climate change? And so I invite you all and encourage you all to think through this with us. And if you want, take a spin through, and I can actually pull up the leaderboard as well, and we can do a little bit of an interactive session here. So thank you all. Let me kind of pull up the leaderboard here, and in case anyone is interested, and then now I can take questions.
Thank you very much. This is has also a kind of sense of humor that I really like. Also being critical and having this humoristic or a sense of humor in that. So thank you very, very much. And I also checked the website some days ago, and already so much was going on in my head when I was looking at this. And I think we all know these questions for ourselves, looking at the news, looking at the media, where the discussion is going on, right? So who is responsible for climate change? Where should we, or whom should we address? So is it the big companies? Is it a private? All the things you're talking about. And I would be really interested in your opinion about this. What do you think about these kind of balancing between, let's say, the private sector, what we call private sector, and the big corporations and the big companies? So because also in the corporations, at least in Germany, we have a kind of a, let's say, system, a leaderboard of how much you can emit and how much you're allowed to emit, and so on and so on. So how would you think this kind of balance could for you work? Or
yeah, I think it's a distraction. I'll just be honest. I think individual responsibility is a distraction in light of some of the larger issues I think Richard was talking about. We don't account for externalities, right? Our current economic system does not account for, the only thing we measure is GDP, right? Gross domestic product is really the only thing we measure. And that often doesn't weigh in factors of emissions or any kind of detrimental effects to the environment. And so when you look at the data, the impact that, obviously we should do whatever we can as individuals, drive less. For those who can afford it, buy an electric car, eat vegetarian or vegan. These are things that help, but they're just a drop in the bucket in the grand scheme of things. They really, they don't make the biggest impact. The biggest impact, I think, is ultimately going to stem from policy changes that hold larger institutions responsible, that hold larger corporations responsible. You know, instead of getting a delivery from Amazon Prime that happens the next day and uses like 16 cardboard boxes as opposed to 2, we should be holding those kinds of corporations responsible for their supply chain practices and whatnot. That's going to make more of an impact.
Yes, thank you. Taylor, I think you have a question.
Yeah, Raphael, I'm super excited about this project, and it reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever been to the Creation Museum, which is in Southern Ohio, but it positions biblical stories as reality through the vocabulary of the Science Museum. So it has this really interesting, like it gets a lot of the authority of its commentary by adopting a very specific set of visual design concepts. And so I feel like this project similarly has a lot of that authority. And I'm curious, have you considered, well, A, is there anywhere in the project where it kind of reveals the nature of its own critique, or are you interested in people consuming this and thinking it's kind of real at the same time? And that gets me thinking about if it's released as an app on the App Store, you know, might there be an audience that is kind of unwittingly doing it while thinking it's not a critique? That's a couple questions at once, but yeah, I'm just excited to hear more about it.
Yeah, I love all of these thoughts. I mean, I think similarly to kind of what inspired me about the project that you all did is like, I think many of the work that we're showing, there's often like so many different ideas and directions that we can move in. And yes, all of the above. I think all of those sound like great ideas. I think there's a playful irony in actually putting this out on the App Store and seeing who thinks it's actually real and then participating in it. And then there's something that is maybe more on the activist side of things, which is really kind of trying to be a little bit more didactic and actually being more explicit about what the critique is and trying to kind of influence others to see that, as opposed to try and like see the kind of the satire, you know, beneath the surface. And so you're raising a couple interesting points. You know, we created this piece and then immediately after the pandemic happened. So I've shown it virtually, and it's been at just a couple of festivals and then more of an academic design conference. And so one thought that I had was to really just kind of, you know, you could almost create different versions of this, right? So to have one that is more geared toward like almost like the Science Museum route, which is more didactic, which is more explanatory because it's reaching an entirely different audience. Whereas more in an aesthetic context, it's a little bit more open-ended, a little bit more critical. So I love that. Would love to chat with you further about that. And I have not been to that museum, even though I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. Haven't even heard of it. So I'll have to look into that.
When you walk in, there are animatronic cave children that are playing with vegetarian velociraptors in a stream.
That's awesome.
Yeah, we'll chat about it.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Amazing. I already look forward to your talk and want to be a mice in that, like, listen what's going on there. Amazing. Thank you so much, Raphael. This was really a nice presentation, and I think I'm really happy to follow up this project and to see when it will launch and how people will react. So thank you very much, and many greetings to Olivia also. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you all.
So now we're coming to the last presentation, which I am also really happy to welcome with us now, Veronica Sellner. So, and I think Paola Tognazzi is also part of the project, but she's, I think, not here. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I overlooked her, but I will introduce to you Veronica Sellner here at that point, and then give her the stage. So Veronica Sellner is a second-year PhD student in digital culture and creative industry at Masaryk University. Masaryk, I don't know if I spell it right or wrong, in Brno. And she focuses on the non-human perspective, artistic research, synthetic biology and art, speculative artistic methods, and she is interested in critical approaches to multidisciplinary research. She also publishes critical texts about contemporary art, and she's also a teacher. So welcome, Veronica Sellner, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for having me and for the introduction. I'm going to share my screen now, and I hope it will work. Share. Can you see it now?
We see that you start sharing the screen, but there's no content yet. Now it's there. Perfect. Thank you.
Yes?
Yes.
Okay. So, hello, everyone. I'm just gonna quickly, yes. So, yeah, now you see the presentation, right? Because I have two screens, so I'm a little bit...
Yes, we see it.
Yeah?
It's perfect.
Okay,
yeah.
great. Thank you very much. So once again, hello from me. As it was said before, I am a PhD student, so my talk is going to be a little bit more on the theoretical side. Actually a lot more, and to sort of start I have to actually introduce the PhD project itself, from which the talk actually sort of I came up with the idea for this talk. Yeah. So the research project itself focuses on artistic interventions within the field of synthetic biology. And we are using these interventions as a gateway to broader questions of overcoming the dualism of technology and nature. And the project is based on understanding the tendencies in thinking about the categories of technology and nature and their interconnection, as well as the analysis of approaches to the redefinition of humanity and the position of inhuman actors or entities, as some of you already said, in different schools of thought, such as speculative realism and object-oriented ontology in various artistic projects. The projects that do work with such questions may represent a new research methodology with the inclusion of non-human actors, while contributing to also a new conceptual apparatus. Also part of this dissertation project is mapping the European institutional context, as well as the genealogy of local context. And I'm based in Czech Republic, and you said very well that it's Masaryk University in Brno, so I'm focusing mainly on the Czech context. Sort of to get us all on the right track, now I would like to introduce the terms I will be talking about. So I'm going to talk about the perception of synthetic biology and the perception of so-called artistic interventions that I also have in the name of my PhD research. So we perceive the works within synthetic biology in the art as a part of bioart, which itself challenges the boundaries between the human and the non-human, the natural and the artificial, or you can also say nature and the technology. For synthetic biology, the living matter is a programmable material, and it aims to change existing organisms or construct completely new biological entities. This discipline is generally defined as an effort to create artificial biological systems through careful conception and design. We also perceive the synthetic biology as a field of interdisciplinary collaboration, where exact discipline, biology, necessarily meets a certain level of creativity. So basically, we're focusing on the place where synthetic biology meets art. And we call this intersection of art, science, and technology with clear artistic intent and artistic intervention. This sort of collaboration necessarily entails a philosophical and theoretical reflection because it offers a playground to think about futures beyond the experience and known, including the emancipation of other life forms, the non-human actors. So the theory very often starts with the post-humanism as a school of thought that looks critically at categories of the living and the artificial and the limits of human nature and the redefinition of its ontology. Catherine Hales uses this term, posthumanism, in the context of a new form of subjectivity that is being shaped by technology and cyberculture. Another important theory is, of course, Bruno Latour's actor network theory, which views the human and the non-human actors equivalent. Recent forms of realism in continental philosophy are referred to as speculative turn in continental philosophy. These forms reconsider the relationship between the human and the non-human, object and subject, natural and artificial, as I've already said many times. Namely, this turn refers to speculative realism, which is classified as post-continental philosophy, which defines itself by rejection of Kantian correlationism, and object-oriented ontology, which is often perceived as a subset of speculative realism, but it differs from it in its homogeneous approach to equality of object relations. We find the mentioned philosophical approaches as a good starting point and very interesting methods for synthetic biology projects and artistic interventions within the field of synthetic biology, because they make it possible to view man, machine, cell, nature as equivalent objects and subjects, let's say actors in Latour's terminology, with no hierarchy between them. Synthetic biology as a discipline is based on the redesign of organisms. Its goal is to create new substances or transform them. Artistic interventions in the field of synthetic biology often use principles of speculative design, which does not aim to propose feasible solutions or offer answers to questions, because speculative design scenarios and proposals can act sort of as a mirror, reflecting the role of technologies and stimulate discussion and contemplation, as we actually saw in the presentation prior to this one. So in the context of contemporary art, speculative realism and object-oriented ontology have made a strong impact as theoretical tools for grasping the non-human, non-anthropocentric, or post-anthropocentric perspective, at least in the European context. Speculation is an ideal tool for thinking about the world from different perspectives, providing the new possibilities for working with the living material while rethinking the conditions of living organisms from an environmental perspective. We can argue that this is desirable for scientists, that it is desirable for scientists to discuss research projects across disciplines, as illustrated by the publication you can see on the slide, which is called Synthetic Aesthetics, Investigating Synthetic Biology's Designs on Nature. This book was an experimental is an outcome of an experimental and international research project that was focusing on the disciplines I've already said. Drew Andy, the co-author of this publication, points out that the purpose of it was also to highlight the need of bringing the lived and possible realities from outside of the laboratory inside. He also adds that scientists actually lack the ability to think about the nature of inhumanity or its redefinition, which is why collaboration with other experts and practitioners or artists outside both the lab and the discipline is desirable and crucial. And now I'm going to be a little bit more specific and show you some examples that I think are interesting and touch upon what I've been talking about. And these two you can see on the slide. These artworks are by Pakui Hardware, and you can see Pakui Hardware focus on long existing and implemented systems and programs to design nature, and they reflect on it. So on the left, you can see two pictures from the project Vanilla Ice. And it's actually the title of the solo exhibition by Pakui Hardware. And the exhibition title indicates sort of two artificial organs, and contains a pun that highlights the interpenetration of the natural and the artificial, the real and the fictional. And the production of artificial aromas like vanilla is not only a sign of scientific progress, but it also challenges us to reconsider our established notion on what's artificial and natural, let's say given and man-made, right? And the installation itself that you can see on those two pictures creates a kind of laboratory full of allusions to the research and production of future organisms and life forms. You can also see or hear the nice wordplay like vanilla ice and vanilla ice cream. Yeah. So on the right, you can see other project, which is called Lost Heritage. And this project researches the relationship between materiality and technology, biology and nature, and how technology is shaping the physical reality and including the human body. And also poses the question when synthetic biology attempts to create organisms from scratch with whole new gene clusters, when does the nature actually become about writing, programming, and designing? Yeah. Another project, and this is, I think, the last slide too, it's a project by Alexander Ginsberg. It's called the whole set. The whole project is called Designing for the Sixth Extinction, and the artist asks question. What might the wilds look like in the synthetic biological future? And it investigates the synthetic biology's potential impact on biodiversity and its conservation. In Ginsberg's version of the future, novel companion species are designed by synthetic biologists to support endangered natural species and ecosystems. They compensate for the biodiversity lost to the monoculture farming of biomass for biofuel and chemical production. She modeled all sorts of fungus, bacteria, or mammals. And on the left, actually, you can see a proposed engineered organism that would be realized in some form with new advances in technology. And on the right, you can see a synthetic slug, and she actually made a whole more organisms than those two I have on the slide here. Yes, so to conclude, in this talk, I was trying to introduce an understanding of tendencies in approaches to the redefinition of humanity and the position of non-human actors in particular schools of thought, so speculative realism, and their subsequent operationalization in examples of artistic interventions in the field of synthetic biology. It is beneficial to focus on ways of thinking about the world from the non-human perspective as an animal or a tree. And also it is desired to ask how it is possible to perceive the world and existence from the non-human perspective as creatures, organisms, objects, or as the nature. It is also an option to explore the possibility of repairing what already has been ruined with the tools of synthetic biology and perhaps redesign our ecosystem. What I sort of left out from this talk is the whole political context in which I'm considering the artistic perspectives and the theories and the philosophy, which is also very important, but also it takes a lot more time to sort of dive into the particular analysis. Yes, so this is everything for me. I will stop sharing now somehow, I hope. And yes, I'm curious if you have some questions. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Veronica. And I cannot imagine a better talk at the end of this day or at the end of the conference than yours, like to really put this also in another context. It's really amazing. Thank you very much for this. And I will also maybe like challenge you also in one of these points here already that you said that you left out, because I think for me, it's really interesting to see like in the political, like if you go into the political realm or to see how that goes on there, because I think in these kind of, let's say, speculative cultures or in these speculative projections that artists can make, there's always a promise also in inhabiting the scene, the gaze, the dreams, the options that we could have as audiences, and not thinking also only about, let's say, professional audiences that might be maybe familiar with the type of speculation that we are confronted with, but also thinking maybe of audiences that are a little bit more far away, seeing these things. And I can just relate, for example, to one example, in Germany, there's this, maybe not only in Germany, but this is what I can talk of. There are the liberals that are saying we have to go for technology that helps us to decarbonize the air instead of reducing carbon emissions. So comparing this to the snail, so how would you see, let's say, these political impacts artists will have or can, let's say, serve to the audiences, and where is maybe speculation also something that needs to be marked as a speculation?
Yeah, okay, well, that's a really complex question also, but I hope that artists will actually have some sort of political impact, but then they would have to be sort of more politically active. I don't think that, politicians or those who have the power will actually invite the artists. But for example, on the local front, like in the Czech Republic and in Brno, especially, like we can see that some of people who deal with critical design, for example, and also speculative design, are invited to take part in local city governments and help them sort of perceive and rebuild the city. So I think that's like one part of the speculation, and that's why it's important for me to also focus not only solely on the art, but also on the methods, and actually develop some sort of methodology and sort of generally describe how you can use speculation within actually also the public discourse. And then there's the second part of the question, or as I perceived it, that within the speculative artistic projects, it's important to give, or maybe not, to give away the general concept and the general permissions, as you said, in which the speculation is based upon. Yeah. So, for example, as a part of my dissertation project, I want to also create an exhibition, and I want to have this dialogue with people from different disciplines to co-create actually a scenario. And I want to have someone from political science to be there and to actually help us look at the problematic in more complex way than only from the artistic or let's say narrator's point of view. Yeah, so for me it's very interesting play with the audience, and I for myself am really interested also in the feministic and emancipatory futures of technology, and I'm a little bit utopistic in that sense. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So, and there was also at the end of your answer, there was also this message coming in and saying that we should summarize and that we should go back to the main room. So there will be like a wrap up of the whole conference. Is there another question to Veronica? No. Okay, maybe also if you have a question, you can maybe write to Veronica later on. I don't know, like if there's a contact on the web. I don't know, like, but very interesting. And yeah, I have a good process with all these, things you want to do, and I'm looking out forward for this exhibition also. This sounds amazing. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you also. So thank you. Let's go back now to the main room, and thank you for your attention.
No, there will be no main room anymore. I just
there will
wanted
be
to
no.
Yeah, no, because we are quite late, and I think everybody already has been could be exhausting all day, but it's of such an intense and great lectures. Yeah, I just wanted to come into your room and say really thank you everybody here, and thank you Danielle for moderating this last panel. And in about 45 minutes, we also will put in the same Zoom in the main room also the Greenhouse concert, which is a recording for Ars Electronica for this year festival. And but it also will be put online. All sessions will be recorded. Everything will be made available online. Also shortly after, I don't know, by tomorrow or by Monday. And I'm looking forward to see you soon again.
Thank you for organizing.
Yes, thank you for organizing. It's wonderful.
That was great.